I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. In today's episode, I'm so excited to be talking to author Danielle Trussoni about her new book, The Puzzle Master. In The Puzzle Master, we see reality and the supernatural collide when a famous puzzle maker named Mike Brink is drawn into a dark conspiracy when he is called as an expert to solve a puzzle drawn by a woman who was convicted of murder. But as he dives deeper into this mysterious puzzle, he becomes obsessed with the woman at the center, Jess Price, and he discovers there are powerful forces at play that could jeopardize humanity and the universe. Readers, I really enjoyed reading this one, and I had so much fun chatting with author Danielle Trussoni. But before we get into the episode, please take a quick second and leave the podcast a 5-star rating and review, because it's a great way to show your support. It opens up new opportunities for the show, helps us find new listeners, plus it keeps me and the podcast going. And it only takes a few minutes. So again, no matter what platform you're listening on, hit those 5 stars and take a few seconds to leave a review. I'll be forever grateful for it. Alrighty, so thanks in advance. And now onto the episode with author Danielle Trussoni. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me to talk about her new book, The Puzzle Master, is author Danielle Trussoni. Danielle, welcome to the Reader's Couch.
It is a pleasure to be here, Victoria. Thank you for having me.
Yay, I'm super excited to have you here. Can't wait to talk about the book, but I always want to know how authors are feeling. This isn't your first rodeo, but it's your newest baby. How excited are you? How are you feeling?
Oh, I don't think anybody ever asks authors how they're actually feeling. This is such a great question, and thank you for asking. So, it isn't my first rodeo. This is my 7th book, but every book is so personal. And this one is my new baby. So I'm feeling really good about it. It's a bit of a whirlwind. It's coming out in 16 languages. So it's one of those things where the pub date keeps changing. There's a pub date here and then there's a pub date there. And so I'm kind of constantly in motion with it. But yeah, I'm feeling really good about it. And the best part about it is that readers have lots of questions for me. So I'm getting lots of notes from readers, and people are connecting with me on Instagram and asking me questions. So I'm feeling really good about it.
Yay, that is so exciting. And I love to hear that it's the gift that keeps on giving. 16 languages, that is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great because I'm getting different covers and different design elements sent to me in the mail. So it's really fun.
Yay, that's fabulous. So I want readers to hear it straight from you. Tell us about your book, The Puzzle Master. What's your elevator pitch, and what can readers expect when they pick up a copy?
So the book is about an ingenious puzzle constructor who is, he's like world famous puzzle constructor. He's called to a prison in New York because a woman, a prisoner who's been convicted of murder, has drawn a mysterious cipher, and they cannot figure it out in the prison, and they call him to try to understand it. And once he starts to unravel this cipher, he gets pulled into a mystery. So that's the elevator pitch. And the thing that I most enjoy hearing that readers get out of it is that they're drawn in by the story, but as they get deeper in, they start to have questions about the nature of the puzzle, and they're drawn into sort of spaces that they never would have imagined they would go to. The book takes some kind of sharp right and left turns, and there's some twists, and it ends up in a surprising place. And I just hope readers enjoy that. It's always disappointing to me when readers are like, oh my God, I didn't expect that. And they don't enjoy going places they don't expect to go. But I'm one of those readers that likes to be transported to someplace completely new and mysterious. So that's what I tried to create in this novel.
Well, I love being transported to new places as
Oh,
well.
good.
Yes,
Fabulous.
something mysterious. And I think that was my allure, not just with the title, but as I started reading. So I kind of want to break things down a bit. First, the book is about a puzzle. And this woman in upstate New York, she has been sentenced to 30 years. I think she's about at the 5-year mark at this point. And she has drawn this mysterious puzzle. And like you mentioned, this world famous puzzle master is called in to solve it. So I want us to start with the puzzle master first. His name is Mike Brink. He's quite an interesting character. He went from being just an everyday person like you and me to then having a traumatic brain injury, which caused a medical condition called acquired savant syndrome. Now, I have to say, I've never heard of it before, so I was discovering something new while reading. This is a very real but rare condition. So I want you to tell us about Mike, who he is, what was his life like before, then this injury happens, and now he has this condition. And if you don't mind sharing a bit about the condition as well.
Of course. So, exactly as you said, Mike Brink was a normal human being, a normal guy, until he suffered an accident during playing football in high school. He was 17 years old and he was hit very hard and suffered a traumatic brain injury to the left hemisphere of his brain. And he developed something called acquired savant syndrome, which, as you said, is very rare but real. I think between 50 and 75 people in the world have been diagnosed with this condition. And what it does is there are different theories about exactly why it happens, but the sort of dominant theory is that because of the injury, there's a lot of brain plasticity and people acquire skills that they didn't have before and sort of rapidly too. So for example, with Mike Brink, he develops a capability with mathematics, with pattern solving, with puzzles. He has an eidetic or photographic memory, and he can learn things very fast, languages and that sort of thing. But other people who acquire this condition sometimes develop, a skill, for example, like a musical skill. There's one person who was struck by lightning, actually, and suffered a traumatic brain injury, developed acquired savant syndrome, and within a couple of months, he was playing concert level piano. He had never played the piano before, but he was drawn to it and he could learn it very quickly. So anyway, this condition absolutely fascinated me when I discovered it. And I knew I had to fold it into a character somehow. And it seemed like, someone who's great at puzzle solving and someone who's drawn into a mystery would be the perfect vehicle for that kind of disorder. So after he acquires this, Mike Brink, the character, becomes a New York Times puzzle constructor. He's a world champion, a world puzzle champion 4 times or 5 times over by the time the book opens. And his life has completely changed. But what was most interesting to me about this character was that he struggles with this gift. He was one way before. He had a normal life. He didn't, have any sort of problems managing how cerebral he's become. And then after this injury, he's completely enslaved in some ways to the way that his brain works. And he needs to actually engage with puzzle solving and with patterns in mathematics in that way, in a way that rules his life. And so I find that dynamic in a character really interesting and kind of the perfect starting off point for a mystery series. Actually, the book will be, there is a second book coming. So he's really at the heart of everything in this book.
Ooh, that is so exciting. I'm so happy to hear it's book 1 of hopefully many. But I have to ask you really quick, are you a puzzler? Are you that person who lives for the New York Times, opens the puzzling and the games app? Every day there's a new game or a puzzle or something being developed. Are you a puzzler? And where did the idea come from to essentially include a puzzle in this novel? Did you do it yourself? What's your relationship with puzzles and puzzling?
So I love word puzzles. And in the book, there are actual puzzles. I did not construct construct any of the mathematical puzzles in this novel. A real puzzle master constructed those for me. But I did, make the word puzzles that are in the book. And I am very interested in, I don't know if you know Wordle or, puzzles like that. I love crosswords, but I'm not obsessive about it. And I don't do a puzzle every day. And I'm not very good, to be quite frank. I'm not very good at it. I do it for pleasure. But this book, the germ of this idea began during the pandemic when I was sort of stuck at home and I was finding that I needed to do things to divert myself and to alleviate the stress of that situation. And I was doing a lot of puzzles. So that was inspiration for sure. The really sort of magnetic element of having a puzzle solver in the book for me was just I'm always looking for a vehicle, an interesting and new vehicle for mystery solving or making a plot feel propulsive and twisty and all of those things without it being sort of the stereotypical crime solving character, a police officer or a detective or something like that. I wanted to do a mystery novel that has a sort of investigative element, but is not a cop novel.
I like that. I love that you're interested in doing something different. I love that he's a puzzler. For me, I only do jigsaw puzzles. I absolutely love those. And the word search, that's as far as I go.
I love jigsaw puzzles as well. I wish I had more time for them. I would do those all the time if I had more time.
No, absolutely. And it has been a great activity to do while I'm listening to my audiobook. So it has been an audiobook. I'm listening, I'm using my hands, I'm doing the jigsaw puzzles. That was my pandemic thing. Plus, I did some crafting projects too.
Yes, I actually also love knitting. So I guess that's crafty. I knit sweaters and I really love, that's how I turn my brain off.
Yes.
After writing.
That's amazing. I'm doing a crochet throw right now. So,
beautiful.
So I want us to talk a bit about Jess. I think we've talked about Mike a bit. Now, Jess is a woman serving time in prison for a murder. It's clear she's traumatized by the crime. She hasn't spoken a word, I think, or maybe she spoke a couple in the beginning, but she hasn't spoken a word for quite some time, 5 years it's been. But she draws this puzzle, and that's how Mike gets involved. So tell us a bit about Jess. We learn, without going into spoilers, that the puzzle itself is tied to a different mystery, something completely separate, but kind of related to why she is in prison. But it's tied to this porcelain doll. So tell us about Jess, who she is, what's going on, this porcelain doll that's at the heart of it, this Jewish cryptic puzzle, and how it all comes together for Jess's side of the story.
Absolutely. So Jess, as you hit on, is really kind of the rabbit hole that we go down to get into all of those elements that you brought up of the mystery. And she is a young woman who, before she was convicted of murder, it was accused of murdering her boyfriend, was a writer. And she had written one novel that did very well. And she went to a home upstate New York, a gorgeous Gilded Age mansion, where she was going to write her next book. And while she's there, I don't want to give too much away, but she discovers in the attic a porcelain doll. And this porcelain doll has been hidden away by the previous owner of the house, who has recently passed away. And this porcelain doll opens up a completely wild story. Inside the doll, sort of hidden in a compartment, is the puzzle that Jess ends up writing, which is a circular cipher that was originally constructed in the 13th century by a Jewish mystic named Abulafia. If that sounds like a big tangle, it's doled out sort of slowly throughout the book. But that cipher has interesting elements, some interesting Kabbalistic powers that the Jewish mystic sort of drew into the cipher. And it's at the heart of why Jess is in prison, what really happened, and also what happens to Mike Brink when he starts to untangle what this puzzle is about and starts to actually sort of solve this cipher. So that's a short way of, sort of summarizing how all of that fits together with Jess. But really, she's the heart of the story. And she is silent because she's been so traumatized by what happens with this cipher and the death of her boyfriend. And Mike Brink sort of has this really intense reaction to her when he meets her. And, it's almost like falling in love, but it's even stranger than that because, she doesn't say anything. It's just this feeling he has. And we find out at the end of the book that feeling, there's a reason for that feeling that has to do with the puzzle. And it has to do with why Jess is in prison.
Right, absolutely. And we do see somewhat of an emotional entanglement between the two. But of course, there's some completely separate and different and powerful forces at work. So I know you mentioned earlier that you had help doing the puzzles. I'm curious, what kind of research did you do for this novel? So in addition to kind of, how do I word this? Puzzles are their own kind of thing, and then novel writing is also its own kind of thing. So how did you fuse the two together, but also what other research did you have to do outside of the puzzling part of it?
Such a great question because yes, the puzzles were one track of the book, if you think of it that way, and the story was another. But what I wanted to do is, because Mike Brink is moving through the novel solving various kinds of mysteries and puzzles, I wanted the actual puzzles that are in the book, the number puzzles and the word puzzles that do sort of yield clues to be challenging and interesting and real. And so I worked with a puzzle constructor named Brendan Emmett Quigley and another one named Huawei Wang. And both of them were recommended to me by Will Shorts, who is the editor of the games page at the New York Times. Will Shorts actually allowed me to come to his home and see his puzzle library, which is enormous and very interesting, and was a great resource for me when I was writing the book. I could just, sort of send him questions about what a puzzle person or puzzler would do, and he would very kindly answer. And often, what I discovered is that my idea of what a puzzle person is very different than what a lot of them are like. And so I would, the process actually very technically was I would get to a point in the story, or, I'd written a draft and I kind of put place markers like there's going to be a puzzle here, there's going to be a puzzle here. And then I would send a note to the puzzle constructor and say, these are the things that the puzzle needs to do. For example, this number puzzle needs to have embedded inside of it a name. And then the puzzle constructor could make a number puzzle that when it's sort of alpha numerically transposed, it creates a word or a name. And so I did that with the puzzle constructors. And, I found it really amazing and really fun. Very humbling because my brain doesn't work that way. But I also found that when I was sort of putting these puzzles into the novel, it created this great texture. And it was a lot of fun for me as the writer to be able to solve these puzzles and then, sort of move forward in the plot. So that's one part of the research and sort of the outside elements other than writing that I did for this book. Another one is, sort of deep dive research into Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, which I knew nothing about before I wrote this book. I was vaguely, sort of aware of what it was just from hearing it around, and having hearing people, certain celebrities say that they do Kabbalah, and so I spoke with, a woman who is a Jewish woman who is very well versed in this subject. And she actually spoke with her rabbi about certain elements of the book. And I worked with her, read a lot of books about the history of Abulafia, the Jewish mystic who is a real person, who I have constructing, this cipher in the novel. And then another track of this is about the porcelain doll, because the porcelain doll, as I mentioned, is kind of this connecting point for the puzzle. It was, the actual puzzle was hidden inside of this doll. And so I wanted it to feel very realistic. And so I spoke with a porcelain specialist from Sotheby's. I did a lot of research about the construction of porcelain. And so it feels, I hope that it feels very realistic, even though there are these sort of wild religious elements in the novel as well, right? It can get a bit once you get to the last third of the book, it sort of feels like all of these things are building, and it's like, oh my goodness, how did we get here? But I want that trajectory there to feel extraordinarily real. And so everything that you read in the book has been researched in and is tied to fact. The religious elements are actually parts of the Jewish religion. The porcelain doll elements are actually, taken from my research about how porcelain is made and how porcelain dolls of the 19th century were made and all of that. So, my favorite thing is when a reader writes to me and says, did some of these things actually happen? Because they feel real, even though it's there's some supernatural or sort of out there elements woven in.
Yes, absolutely. And I enjoyed the back and forth with this book very much. I loved trying to figure the puzzle out as I went along. So it was just really wonderful to read. Another thing I loved was we were traveling both to Prague, we're in the United States, we're in present day, we're going back in the past. You also accomplished this through writing letters. How important was time and place? And of course, kind of giving us that first person view through the letters. Was that intentional?
It was intentional to bring, I felt that bringing the first person point of view of the doll maker. So there's only one first person point of view in the book, and that's of the doll maker who constructed this porcelain doll in the 19th century. He built the doll, made the doll in Prague. So there are, as you said, a series of letters written by this doll maker about his experience that explain to the reader essentially like how this doll came to carry this puzzle. And it's an excavation of sorts, because the present, 80, I would say 90% of the book is sort of, contemporary present day action, the story of Jess Price, this murder that she's been convicted of, and Mike Brink solving the mystery that sort of explains what's happened to Jess Price. But this little thread, this sort of 10% of the book that's in letters and in the first person, I thought was really interesting, for me anyway, because it gives texture, it gives a kind of excavation of how it happened. And I'm one of those readers that really likes to feel immersed in a novel. I like to feel like the world is very full. And when I start having questions about how things happened in the present, how they're connected to elements in the past, sometimes, not always, but sometimes I like to see that explanation play out for me in scenes and characters, and to feel it and experience it with the present day characters. So all of that is to say that, yes, we do go into the mind, the first person point of view of this doll constructor. And it really grounds the book, in my opinion.
Yes, I loved having those letters. I think it was incredibly important. So you mentioned this book is the start of what is to be a series. What can you tell us about book 2? Is there anything you can share with us at this time?
I can tell you a lot about it because I just finished it and turned it into my publisher.
Yay!
Yay, I know. It was a huge week for me because I finished it, turned it in. It's called The Puzzle Box. And it again, we have Mike Brink, this sort of main protagonist, as the center of the book. He is asked to go to Japan, where a 19th century puzzle box holds a secret of the imperial family. This puzzle box was made in the late 19th century by the Emperor of Japan, Meiji. He put something inside of it and nobody knows what it is. He passed away without ever telling anyone how to open it. So every 12 years in the Year of the Dragon, the family brings a puzzle solver to Japan to try to open it. And it's Mike Brink's turn. Nobody has opened it before. And so that's the premise. He goes to Japan and he does, I don't want to give too much away, but he opens it and all sorts of crazy things start to happen.
Wow. Okay. I'm excited. It's interesting. It's fascinating. I think, and even for readers, if you've already read this book and you're listening to this, I know you'll think that, well, Mike is such an incredibly smart person who makes silly mistakes, but that's what I loved about him as well. And just kind of see how he grapples with his talent, so to say, because this really is a special gift. So I'm excited to see how this would translate in this book, because seeing that it's all timed, it's like every 12 year thing. So I'm very excited.
Yeah. And I love that you say that he makes silly mistakes. It's true. I think that we have this idea that a genius or someone who's extraordinarily good at one thing is good at everything. But the way that doctors have described the actual disorder of savant syndrome is an island of genius. And it's true. He has this one very deep and special ability and gift that's almost like a superpower. But at the same time, he's a regular person in every other way and makes mistakes and feels vulnerable and feels inadequate in all the ways that we do. So, when it translates to another culture, like Japan, it's also interesting because he's interacting with sort of cultural codes that he's not aware of. And I can't wait to talk to you about that book in the future, because I went to Japan and, to do the research, and I lived in Japan for a couple of years. So there's just a lot of elements of Japanese culture and puzzles that are in the book that I think people will love.
Oh, wow. Okay. This is so exciting. Amazing. All right. So I'm curious, Danielle, this is your 7th book. You just finished number 8, which I'm excited about. If you could tell your younger writing self anything, looking back, maybe going back to book 1 or even before you were published, what would you tell her?
Such a good question. I think I would tell her to just relax and do the writing. To just love the writing, which is something that I do even today. My favorite part of being a writer is actually sitting down at my desk. I write longhand with a fountain pen. I know that sounds a little bit silly, but I love the tactile feel of paper, and I love using colored inks. And so I would just tell her, don't worry about the marketing, don't worry about getting an agent, don't worry about the publishing so much, but just really sink in and love the process. And, for all of those listeners who are writers as well, writing every day or on a regular schedule and just loving the process of creating characters with language is a huge reward. It's its own reward, I think.
I love that. So I want to get into your reading life. So even though we're here to talk about your book, The Puzzle Master, I want to know what you're reading. So tell me about the last book that you read that you'd now recommend.
So I have 2 books, and these are writers that I've done events with in New York, and that are friends of mine. And I feel very lucky to have their input on my work. We read each other's books. One is The Leftover Woman by an author named Jean Kwok. And another is Broadway Butterfly, which is a historical mystery by an author named Sarah DeVello.
What would you say was your favorite childhood book that you can remember?
So I loved fantasy. I loved anything that brought me completely out of my life. And so I remember the Narnia books were, a huge discovery for me. I kind of love darker books. I mean, I'm talking childhood, I'm thinking like my teen, 11, 12, 13. I loved Edgar Allan Poe. I loved Stephen King. I would read anything that was a little bit mysterious and dark. The Nancy Drew series, of course. All of those books were books that I read over and over as a kid.
I love that. And what books are you looking forward to reading in the year ahead? Because again, holiday season is upon us, brand new 2024 ahead as well. What books are you looking forward to reading?
Well, so the book that I'm really looking forward to, actually the series that I'm looking forward to reading is Dune, because I've never read this. And all of my friends and so many of the writers I love cite that book as really influential. So I'm planning to read Dune and probably the other books in that series. It's monumental. It's a very long series.
Can I let you in on a secret? I haven't read it either.
Oh, good. Okay. So I feel better because it's something that just, this big hole in my reading history.
Yes, we have that gap for sure. So, so on the podcast, we also love indie bookstores. Share with our listeners your favorite indies.
So one of my favorite independent bookstores comes with an independent bookseller. It's Mystery to Me in Madison, Wisconsin. And the bookseller is Joanne. And she is one of those booksellers. If you walk into the store, she'll be able to just sort of look you up and down, assess what you want, and have a bunch of recommendations for you. She's really wonderful.
I love hearing that. We love our booksellers here. So getting back to your book, The Puzzle Master, I know we've chatted about it for a bit. I'm really excited about the next book in the series. So exciting. But for those readers who haven't read The Puzzle Master yet, they're picking up a copy for the first time. I know you've done your job, you've written it, but what are you hoping readers might feel or think after they've turned the very last page? I mean, I think they're going to say, what a bonkers ending, but what are you hoping for?
Yeah, it is a bit of a bonkers ending. I hope that they take away a sense of being, as I mentioned earlier, transported, taken to someplace they've never been before, and also intrigued by the idea of what the human brain can do. I feel that Mike Brink opens possibilities, at least, the idea of acquired savant syndrome opened up possibilities for me about what our brains can do and what we can learn and how mysterious actually we are as human beings. So I guess a sense of mystery and a sense of being transported. And of course, loving Mike Brink because he's coming back.
Danielle, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It was really fun. And thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.